Hi, everybody. We are live with the Python Pulse, a Python at Microsoft live stream. I'm so excited to be here today. It is our second episode. If you didn't get a chance to see our first episode with Pamela Fox, it was last month. You got to check it out. We went deep on dev containers, and it was so much fun. And we had a lot of really great interactions. And I see we have a bunch of people signing in right now. If you want to sound off in the comments, tell me where you are. We got a lot of people last time talking about all over the place. We're going to start this stream with some announcements, and then I'll be able to introduce the excellent team. I try not to play favorites at Microsoft. I really don't, but this is one of my favorite teams to jump in on. They have like an awesome dynamic, and I'm so excited to share that with you today. Today, we're going to be meeting the Python for VS Code team. We're going to talk Pylance, Python-based extensions in VS Code, their day-to-day, addressing issues submitted by the community, and how to get the most out of your VS Code in your Python programming. So for the announcements today, the Azure App Service team is celebrating 10 years of their free tier for students, hobbyists, entrepreneurs, Pythonistas looking for free Azure app development. Check out these options if you want to get your app in the cloud. And we have two awesome Python advocates at Microsoft speaking at the Python Web Conference coming up soon, and run by the really awesome people at 6 Feet Up. I've had a bunch of interactions with them in the community as I've done community work, and their team really embody the kindness and pursuit of knowledge I love in the Python community. So if you get a chance, please join, watch these two awesome talks. There's one-click deploys of Python web apps to Azure, and there's also designing effective load tests for your web application given by Pamela Fox and Anthony Shaw, respectively. Don't miss those. They're going to be really, really great. The next point, the awesome VS Code editor, known for its extension in the marketplace, is now facilitating Pythonistas to build our own Python-based extensions. The Python extension template helps you get started building your own VS Code extension for your favorite Python tool. So we love seeing Python extension activity, and we've been highlighting some in our Python dev blog. And we'll also get to talk with some of the people who've been doing the work to highlight the really great people. So it's all full circle today. It's going to be really great. We have Azure App Service now supports Python 3.11. That is the newest Python release that came out this past October, also with the help of the Microsoft's Faster C Python team. And if you're interested in reading more about the ways that Microsoft played a part in the Faster C Python, you can go to devblogs.microsoft.com/Python. And we have blog posts out the wazoo, more to come, and you can see read there about more about Faster C Python. We also have Azure Functions that is now in Python 3.10 preview, and Azure Developer CLI, which is a command line interface for Azure solutions and provides a clear path for writing code for the cloud. There are templates for AZD at Awesome AZD, and we now have more Python templates, and we welcome community contribution for Python templates as well. And if you want to check out more on the show notes, I ran through that pretty fast. At the bottom of the screen, you can go to that link, ak.ms/python-pulse-002-pvsc. That's for the Python Visual Studio Code -team. So now we're going to jump into it. First up is Luciana Abud.
Hi.
Do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Well, hello, everyone. Thanks for having me here today. I am the PM for Python and Visual Studio Code. I'm located in Vancouver, and yeah, I'm very happy to be here.
And this is like the second time we've been able to do like a cast together. I was on your podcast. You want to shout out your podcast? Please do. It's so
Thank
cool.
you. Yes. Well, thank you very much. We are the Set Python Girls Club podcast. We just released a new episode today. Do check out Donna's episode. It's one of my absolute favorites. She's absolutely amazing. So yeah, thank you.
We had fun. All right. Next up is Kartik.
Hello everyone. So I work as a software engineer in this team, primarily in the environments and the terminal component of this extension.
It's so cool to have you here. Yay!
Thank you for having me.
How about Eleanor? Hi.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. I'm good.
So excited to be here. My name's Eleanor. I just joined the Python team in August, but I was an intern with the team before, so I came back. I do testing, and then also for the core VS Code, I do remote SSH.
Cool. All right, Courtney.
Hey, I am Courtney. I'm so excited to be here. I joined the team back in July, so I'm pretty new, and I am the co-PM with Luciana on the Python extension team, and I'm based out of Austin, Texas.
Yay. Can you see Microsoft from your window?
No.
Okay, good. You live far enough away from the office. That's great. Okay, and Karthik.
Hello. So I am in Redmond, Washington, in the main campus right now.
Awesome.
So I am the lead on the Python extension team. I also work on creating other extension for tools, and I maintain a bunch of libraries and basically create problems for Courtney and Luciana.
That's awesome. Okay, and Brett.
Hi, everybody. I am the dev manager for this crazy group of people. Been working on the extension now since September of 2017, so I think I may have been working on this longer than anyone else on the planet at this point. I'm calling from Vancouver, Canada, from the unceded territory of the Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Musqueam First Nations, and also do a whole bunch of Python stuff outside of Microsoft because of my involvement with the Python language itself. But that list is a bit long, so I'll keep it short. And
It's a long list. I knew Brett before I got here. I knew of Brett before I got here. It was very, very cool, full circle. And now we have Paula.
Hi everyone, I'm Paula. I'm Sophie new too. I'm in the team for I guess 1 year and a half. I'm from Peru. I'm located in Vancouver, but right now I'm in Peru visiting my family. I'm so excited to be here.
Nice. So on the call, we have like people all over the world. And in the chat, we have Pakistan. Hello from Russia. Hi, Russia. We have Brazil. Awesome. This is so great. Bangladesh, Stockholm, Mexico, Egypt, San Diego, one of my favorite cities, Saudi Arabia, Norway. This is great. I'm so excited to have everyone here. Thank you so much for joining. I have like chock full of questions for this team today, and selfishly it was a bunch of things that like I wanted to know. I'm on with this team good weeks. I get to see them a couple of times a week, and so hopefully we have some really engaging questions too. Please feel free to engage with the chat, ask questions if we have time for them, or if they come up later in the chat, I'll let you know. So hold tight, we'll talk about it later, and if it's relevant to what we're talking about right then we'll bring it up and we'll just have a really cool casual conversation. And so we have like a lot of people on the call today, so hopefully the questions will add a little bit of organization. All right, so I'm going to be keeping a close eye on the chat. We're going to keep this interactive, but I wanted to bring up our first question of the day. What is your favorite issue your team has been able to solve? Do we have any volunteers? Eleanor, Paula, maybe Brett, do you have ideas?
I can hop on. So what I think is really unique about the team that is not on a lot of other software teams is that we read all of the issues that anyone submits to us on our GitHub. And so this means that we try our best to solve all the issues that are coming in from people. And we actually get to solve issues that you guys are having. That's hopefully fixing our extension for you. One of my favorites as a user is probably what Kartik's been working on, the create environment command. I am so bad at creating a Python environment. It is definitely not one of my strong suits, something I hope to get better at. But I really appreciate the fact that we now have a great way to do that on VS Code.
That's awesome. And it's really funny. I kind of got like demolished on the internet because I was like, is this really a blind spot for users? And it is. It absolutely, if you are one of very many people who have issues, or, maybe it's not an issue, but it's just a hurdle to remember every time what you need. So like I got demolished on the internet for that one. But sometimes it's tough to not, to know how everyone is programming in the areas that they need to overcome when working on a new language, working in a new terminal, all of those things. So I appreciate you saying that, and I appreciate all of you all working on that. More favorite issues.
I can talk about one.
Yeah.
So, we'll talk about, go into detail about what it actually is in one of your next questions about Django and stuff. But my most favorite has been fixing the reload problem for Django. It was, so what happens with, I'm not gonna say about Django because that's a next question, right? But it involved me re-architecting the entire debugger, and we ended up shipping a new debugger. So previously we used to have something called PTVSD, and then we switched to DebugPy, which is the current debugger, and it's been the main debugger for a couple of years now. But that particular work was my most favorite, like, big issue that I can think about, like that. There are many others but that was one of my first ones that I really enjoyed doing.
Yeah, that sounds like a hairy problem. Awesome. I'm excited to hear about it more and other things in the later questions as well. Django will definitely come up. I'm a Django fan. Django comes up almost every episode I want on. Great.
By the way, you can tell you're talking to a bunch of software people when someone goes, my most exciting thing was having to completely rewrite something I wrote previously.
Absolutely. Totally. All right. So we're going to move to the next question. So what are the ways that you're currently interacting with the community? You could talk about past tense, present tense, future tense.
So we try to keep ourselves fairly accessible. So there's a couple of ways. So on GitHub is obviously the obvious one because that's where we have issues. We also have a discussion section turned on the GitHub repo where we have people come in and ask for help for things that are not specifically bug specific, just maybe more a configuration problem or something along those lines. We have historically been active on Twitter, but obviously for various reasons, not so much anymore. But for instance, I'm on Mastodon, as I know Don is as well. So I try to make myself accessible there. We do have a Discord instance that is kind of in the process of being kind of rebooted, which Don and some other fellow CDAs are taking care of, but we're also there. But generally, we're just kind of everywhere, just trying to be wherever people happen to be and just try to make ourselves available to folks.
I will also add that we try to go to a few conferences. So if you go to PyCon US or PyCascades, that is actually happening next March here in Vancouver, I will be there. And it's also a way that you can interact with us if you're going.
Oh, yeah. Luciana's the lead on the PyCascades planning, and she's kicking butt. I'm excited. Okay, great. Cool. Let's move on to the next one. We have so many questions. I just want to make sure we're getting through them. So if other people are interested in outside of this team to create a Python-based extension for VS Code, how do they proceed? What's the best way on moving forward with creating their own extension?
I'm like looking at Karthik.
So there are a couple of things here. So if you are writing something like a tool that is language analysis based, like a linter or formatter or something that analyzes code, you should look into something called language server protocol. And we have templates for this, which we'll talk about in a follow-up question that's going to come up later. Then if you're writing just execution or something that you just need the Python and you're going to do something else with it, like maybe run something or whatever that you want to try, you can use the Python extension APIs. So you just depend on the Python extension, and then we have an API surface that you can use to work on calling the Python extension to get the selected Python, or there are a bunch of things that you can do, or you can set the Python that you want and things like that. Then there is a bigger, broader thing, like, okay, let's just say that you are writing a new debugger, like what you're going to do or how you're going to do. So for those things, you might want to look into debug adapter protocol, and you can look into the VS Code's own set of extension APIs and build on that. I mean, those are like broad ways that you can work with it. I would say that if you really want to try something, just look into some of our simpler extensions. Like we have a Pylance extension and a few others. You can look at those and kind of study and understand like what you will really need and how much TypeScript and how much Python you need to know to do something.
Interesting. That's a really good point. That's a really, really good point. I'm going to go out of order because that's actually a really great question that I had a little bit later. Let's see if I can find the question. Here we go. What languages are usually using while you're programming your day-to-day and supporting Python in VS Code? How much Python, how much TypeScript?
Yeah, so to kind of talk a little bit about what Karthik said, I definitely, when you go to create your first extension in VS Code, there's a great little doc you can follow along, very easy command to just spin up all the files you need to get started. But yes, it is in TypeScript because VS Code is based in TypeScript. So this was something I came into this team not having very much TypeScript experience. So I had to learn that, but it's really fun getting to do both languages, seeing the differences and similarities. Right now, I'm doing a rewrite on debugging on testing in the VS Code, and so right now I'm doing about like half and half in terms of like TypeScript versus Python code.
Okay.
Which is really fun because I get to have Brett do my code reviews. And I've never gotten better code reviews. I'm like getting like peak advice in terms of how to fix my Python code. So that's been really fun getting to do both. But it is true, TypeScript you kind of have to start out with because it is an Electron extension.
Oh, interesting. And that context switching from like TypeScript to Python must be like a mental thing. But I like that you called it fun. Yeah, we're like a stream full of engineers here. Engineers and awesome PMs. This is really, really great. Cool. Do you have more thoughts on? Did anyone else wanted to chat more about like the languages you're using or Python extensions?
Yeah, in my case, well, since everyone else, the extension is right on TypeScript, so the most language that I'm using right now is TypeScript. And as Eleanor, when I joined the team, I think I didn't use TypeScript too much because I used to write the code in Python. So it was kind of learning that. But since we have a lot of users experience, and also since Python is the language, I think it's the most common language for people to start learning programming. We also have like a really simple issues. So what happens, for example, we sometimes have an issue really complicated because Python is a really powerful language and you can do everything that. So sometimes happens that we have an issue that the user use Python in a way that I never see it. So it's like also helped me to learn new ways to use Python and to explore that.
Interesting. I actually didn't think about it that way. You're definitely, I guess the issues that come in all those use cases must really keeps you on your toes. That's awesome. Awesome.
I'll also say we're also constantly working to bring more Python into the extension. It started as very TypeScript based for good reason. But over time, what we've realized is that's a hindrance to people coming to contribute because the extension is open source. And we do want people from the community to feel able to come in and help and contribute and see what they want out of it to come out. And so we've been slowly working on doing that through things such as the template that you linked to earlier, Dawn, and the various other extensions that Karthik and everyone else on the team have been building, so that things we can put behind language server protocol can be written in Python, because that's literally just a Python server running as a process that VS Code connects to. So it allows, and LSP was designed specifically for that use case, for languages to have their tooling in their native language, for the native programming language that people want to work with, without having to feel fully shackled to TypeScript. And it's something we want to move towards, even to the point of even like our maintenance scripts, like being more Python than being like a gulp file, right? So we're just constantly looking for ways to improve that. It's not always something we get to prioritize, but it is a general goal of ours to basically maximize the Python and minimize the TypeScript.
Awesome.
Not to say anything bad about TypeScript, but we obviously have a slight bias on this team.
We're on the Python Pulse. I think we can be a little biased. Cool. All right, the next question. What extensions do the Python VS Code team maintain?
I can take this one.
Okay, go ahead.
So originally there was just the one Python extension which came with embedded support of various tools like linting, formatting, IntelliSense, all in one. So as we realized that it was growing too big for us to maintain each and every tool. So lately we have been starting to break components into their own extensions. So starting with IntelliSense, for example, Pylance is its own extension. And Karthik has been working on his template, which he'll talk about more, to break tools out into their own extension. For example, linters such as Pylint and Flakeit are their own extensions. Formatters, Black, Autopepate. There's also the Jupyter extension. And am I forgetting something, team?
We got a shout out that the Pandas integration is wonderful. So props to the team.
Yes.
To be a bit clear on this, though, we personally, this group of folk, don't maintain Pylance or the Jupyter extension. Those are done with sibling teams. So Luciana, for instance, is the PM also for Pylance, but we don't directly maintain that extension. We just get to partner closely with them and work with them on stuff. And the exact same thing goes with Jupyter. Actually, Don Giamatti, the original creator of the extension, actually now works on the Jupyter extension.
Oh, cool. Yeah. I don't think I'd make that connection. That's awesome. Yeah. Cool.
We also, to actually just add on to this kind of what we're in charge of theme, other than also the template that Kartik mentioned and Karthik earlier, we also just launched a couple months ago a package on PyPI called LS Protocol, which auto-generates all the types for language server protocol to make it easier for projects to be able to do that. It's actually been integrated into PyGlass, which is probably one of the most popular LSP implementations in Python. Although we do have some audacious goals to use that to actually generate the message types for other languages. For instance, we're starting to have conversations about doing that for Rust. I think there's a little bit of chatter for Java, maybe. So there's a couple other things there where we're trying to, once again, lower the barrier of entry for people to kind of create their own extension by pushing as much into Python as we can and helping make that as easy of a process as possible.
Awesome. Cool. And we got some forward-looking things as well. I appreciate that. All right. We chatted about what languages we mostly use. Let's talk about what's the life cycle of an issue. So I'm a user. I may be having some issues with VS Code. I submit an issue on the GitHub repo, and then it gets into your hands. What happens next?
First it goes into the triaging flow. So every Monday to Thursday, as a team, 9 a.m. we look into all the new issues that came in, and then we first of all we decide if it's an issue related to the Python extension, or if it's an issue related on user's machine, in which we help them out to fix that issue on their end. Otherwise, we transfer it to the correct channels. So that's the first point. Some of the issues are feature requests, in which case we label them appropriately and wait for more community feedback to see more interest before we start approaching them. For the other issues, we assign them, and based on priority, then we take them in some iteration in the future. And once they come in the iteration, we fix the issues. And then normally there is a 4-week iteration planning. And the last week of the iteration planning, we have a testing week in which we verify all the fixes we made for the issue. So in that particular thing, all the team from VS Code participates to verify fixes for all of the issues.
Cool. Okay. That makes sense. Very clear. And I actually get to see those when I get on some of y'all's meetings. So that's been really, really exciting to watch how the sausage gets made. Do we have any more thoughts or comments on the issue process?
So one thing I'll just throw up real quick is we actually have a custom report issue command in the extension. If you literally launch the command palette and type report issue, you'll see like a generic kind of report issue that VS Code provides for anybody. And then we, for Python, have a very specific one. I think it's literally Python:report issue. And the nice thing is when people use that, it will actually pre-populate the box with a bunch of information that we find really useful. It was actually Paula's starter project when she joined the team, and it's been really invaluable when people use it. The link you shared earlier, Don, the aka.ms/pvsc-bug actually outlines using that command because it just adds a lot more information. So that's one other way we try to help with the lifecycle of an issue, just trying to get the issue up front and ahead of people before we have to like potentially go back and say, could you actually add this little bit of information that we just didn't happen to know up front, and to try to help shorten that life cycle.
Cool. I'm going to put it back up on screen. Awesome.
Another thing that's really nice about all our GitHub issues is they are all there in the archives. So if you're maybe too nervous to post your issue or post your bug, you can at least search for it. So if you have one, look it up in our repo, and we probably replied to someone that has a very similar issue to you. And you can hop in the comments, say I'm having the same one. For all we know, there's a lot of people that are having it, and we definitely want to hear if it's like widespread, because then it's so important for us. But definitely check out previous issues. I know even for myself, I will go back through our old GitHub issues and be like, how did someone fix this when they ran into this bug? Like my setup isn't working right now. So that like archive of conversations is like super helpful.
Absolutely. I know that I'm like digging into the old issues, especially in open source. And I appreciate, because this is like hybrid open source and we are absolutely very connected to the community. So I'm glad to see that process highlighted.
Yeah, we're definitely open source. I asked a question last week, and Brett was like, I rewrote the doc, the public facing doc, so you and the other intern could make sure you know how to do that. So all the docs you guys see are the ones we're using, and we're fixing them up for each other, for you guys. So they're super useful.
Oh gosh, that's really helpful. Great. That's great. So people who are submitting issues are absolutely invaluable to helping the growth of the Python support in VS Code. I can definitely consider that a contribution. Also, people who we've also mentioned creating their own extensions, are they getting recognized in any type of way for their contributions, and how?
Yeah, I can take that one. I think Brett and Karthik all touched on this. We don't shy away from external contributions, and we like to give credit where credit's due. So we highlight the community in our blog post by doing community highlights. And so, for example, if you make an extension, we'll shout you out. And then we also do GitHub releases. So we can mention the GitHub handle and thank our contributors, and especially our first-time contributors.
Awesome. And I've definitely seen some of these blog posts that definitely have come out from Luciana and Courtney. Make sure you're checking the Python dev blog, where we'll continue to update with really great release notes and substantive information on using Python and VS Code and all of the above.
Yeah, and Courtney is now our official blog writer, and I love checking the posts that she writes as well. So check out the next one early next month, I guess.
Yeah, the last one I think was February release notes, which is great. Cool. So what happens if I need help creating and publishing my Python extension?
So I can take that one.
Sure.
For most of this, I think VS Code has a good resource on in their documentation on how to publish, and the steps are actually pretty straightforward. Like it's basically you use a VSCE, which is a tool that VS Code publishes to NPM that you can use to publish your extensions via command line, or you can even use the interface and do that, and it'll tell you if there is anything wrong. But then again, you can always ask questions in the template repository that we have for if you're having issues with publishing your extension that is based off of those templates, and we can definitely help. And I have there are a couple of people who have already published a bunch of extensions based on the templates that we provide, and we guide through the process on how to do it if you run into any roadblocks.
Very cool. Cool. All right. So if I have an issue with VS Code and I'm not sure how to isolate the problem, where should I start?
I can take that one. So I guess by this, what this means is if I notice there is a bug, but I'm not sure whether it's a bug on my computer or it's a bug with VS Code itself. So in that case, how you can begin with isolating the issues is that, for example, if it's a bug that you notice that is related to a tool, so Python extension, like it reports all the commands it runs regarding tools in the Python output channel. So you can just run that command outside of VS Code, and if that works, then that's an issue with VS Code, in which you can use the Python report issue command. Similarly, if something does not work in VS Code terminal, you can try an external terminal and see if the command works there. That way you can also verify that. And like if nothing works, then you can always use the report issue command or the Python report issue command, and we can assist you with that and have a look. And Eleanor also does that on this earlier, but you can always scrape through our repository to search through existing similar issues that you might be facing.
Right. That's great. Do you have more thoughts on this one?
Yeah, there's actually, if you're not sure if it's coming from an extension or from VS Code itself as well, there's a really cool feature. There's a bisect command basically for extensions that will basically bisect all the extensions you have turned on and that you try to reproduce the problem, and then one by one basically turn off half the extensions. Did it show up again, yes or no? If yes, then okay, then one of the ones that's still on, and then it just keeps bisecting down the list until it tries to help you isolate exactly which extension caused the problem. So that's also a really helpful way to try to figure out whether it's actually our extension or not, because sometimes people will install multiple Python related extensions and it actually turns out not to be us. And sometimes it does, right? We're not perfect. But that's also another really easy way to try to find out exactly if it's an extension or not that's causing the issue.
Oh, that's really helpful. Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Cool. So I selfishly would love to know. I love Django. We also have Flask support. I like Flask as well. I want to know a little bit more about what the current Django and Flask support in VS Code looks like, and any tidbits about forward looking. How does that happen? And who's done that work? And I'd love to know a little bit more about like stories on getting that done, and I don't know, hurdles you've had.
All right, I'll take this one because I said this was the thing that I like the most. So previously, what would happen was one of the things that both Django and Flask support is that when you edit the request handling code, right? What it does is Django management will look at that file, and whenever there is a change to that file, it'll completely reload that backend for that particular file, right? And we had a debugger called PTVSD, which was a in-process debugger. So that means that it had to run in the process that you are debugging. A problem with that and the Django or Flask was that when Django decides to reload a process, it's terminating the current version of it and then starting a new process. But if the debugger is in that process, you just kill the debugger, and there is no way to debug the new code that came out. So one of the things that I did as my initial entry into this extension was that I, before joining into this extension, was creating a new debugger that was able to handle all of these scenarios in a way where you did not have to reattach to the newly reloaded process after you made some change to the handler in Django. So that was basically it, and it was a significantly large item. It took me about a year and a half to get the whole thing done and shipped out. So it was a lot of work. It involved working with the creator of PyDevD, Fabio, and another person from our team as well, Pavel, who works specifically on the Python side of things in a different sister team. So yeah, I used to work on debugger, and then I moved here, and when I moved here, then I worked a little bit more on getting the reload experience working right, and that was the big chunk of my work. And it took about 2 years to get from having a completely in-process debugger to getting it out and getting it there. But the intent was not just to solve this problem. There are a bunch of other things that we solved as well, like being able to connect inside a Docker container and a lot of other scenarios that had to be handled. And the direction of connection, previously it was only unidirectional, like debugger had to connect to something, but now the debugger allows you to go from IDE to debugger or debugger to IDE connections and things like that. So like all of these, they might not sound like, okay, what's the big deal? But like if you're thinking about containers, well, in container, talking into a container is harder because you have to expose ports, whereas talking out of a container might be easier because, firewall and restrictions are different and things like that. So
Yeah.
So being able to provide a lot of different ways to work with the debugger, and like even launching user code, right? Some people have used Gunicorn to launch something. Like, how do you work with something like that? Like, how do you
Right.
back and think? So the new debugger that I architected was capable of handling all of those scenarios. So previously we could not do it, but now we could.
Cool.
And-
Sounds like a really big deal to me. I know. That's awesome.
Yeah, but the thing is that the end goal that you see is very tiny, right? Like, oh, it's just solving a small problem. But to get there, the amount of work that we had to do was significant. Like, reload is not as easy as it might sound. Like, there is also in-process reload, which is even more crazier and a lot more complicated to deal with, which we kind of handle and do, but like it's again very, very strongly dependent on states and stuff like that. So there is that one chunk. So debugging, right? So there is another part of debugging here as well. So you can set breakpoints inside templates. So if you have a HTML template for Django, or you're using Jinja template for Flask or something like that, you can set breakpoints inside your the Django templated part of your code as well. So we added support for things like that. The other thing is we also made the configurations, right? Like, so you could, we added the ability to put in some default things into the configuration so that you could work with it without having to write the configuration yourself for Django and Flask and things like that.
Cool. Wow, that's a lot of support that you. So a little bit going off script here. I hope you don't kill me after we get off the call. So there's a lot of things. I've seen some of it in our meetings, but what are some things that you all are doing as you're prioritizing a lot of these features on multi-days a week basis? It's not just weekly that you're looking at these issues. How are you prioritizing the support? And especially as you mentioned, Karthik, that it's going to like touch a lot of different areas, and sometimes you can solve a couple of things together over here and a couple of things together over here. What does that look like? And was that, and for people who are newer on the team, was that something new for you to kind of get into and kind of learn how to navigate?
So, I mean, go ahead.
Yeah,
Lucy.
sure. No, you can keep talking, and we can also have people jump in. I know I'm off script now, so we'll just have a free for all.
So it really depends on what classification the problem falls into, right?
Okay.
Like, let's just say that there is a problem with some area, right? Like Python is configurable in so many ways. It was released in 1991. There are like a bajillion tools that are there for. It was before Linux, by the way. If you guys didn't know, Brett can talk more about like when Python came into existence. There's so many tools and so many ways to do things. What happens is we are trying to like cover as broad of a thing as possible. And what that means is that there are a lot of corner cases that won't work. And when users come to us and file issues, the thing is, sometimes we look at it and we know what is the problem, but we may not be able to address it immediately because we want to solve a class of that problem, those problems at once. As I said, for example, like for this reload, right? This was a problem that was reported by a lot of users for a while, but we couldn't solve it immediately because we had to look at it, take a step back, and be like, okay, we could have solved it in a short-term kind of way, but then that would restrict us from solving it in a way that would solve an entire class of problems.
That makes sense.
So that we could cast a broader net of people that who can work with our extension, right? So whenever a user reports an issue, sometimes we kind of look at it and be like, okay, is this indicating towards a deeper problem that we need to solve by like changing something or changing how we do certain things? So that's one way, right? And there are some other cases where it's like, oh, this is just one thing that we can just take care of in this by making a minor surgical change to something, and then we can take that and go. So usually, because of the fact that we work on like broad segments and things like that, it's not so like straightforward to just make something change and expect it to like work for everyone. So we have to be very careful in how we are doing or what we're doing, and it takes a lot more time than usual to
And I appreciate you highlighting the broad strokes versus the precision necessary to kind of like big tasks, smaller tasks, or even if it's not smaller but just precise problems to address. That makes sense. And I've seen that in other triaging projects that I've had, but I really like this context. And would anybody else on the team be interested in talking about maybe even if it was like a learning curve, or if you have been on a team that did it a little bit differently than the way the Python VS Code team does it?
Yeah, I kind of had two comments bouncing off what Karthik said. So one is what I'm working on right now. I'm doing a rewrite for how we do testing. So how PyTest and unit tests, which our wonderful intern who's coming back wrote that section. And one of the big things with that is we're getting a ton of bugs that relate to how testing works. And, there could be a way that we could go in and try and patch each individual one and, try and fix each small scenario, but that wasn't going to really work long term. And so we're doing a complete rewrite in how it works from the ground up. And that's what's I really like about how we do things on the team is that, we want to make it work with as many configurations as possible and as close to how it might work, like with PyTest, for example, like if you run it in the terminal, like we want to replicate the behavior as close as possible so that people can use all the functionality that all these external libraries have, and so that things can keep growing on top of it. So I think that is really important. So in the middle of the rewrite, and I still keep getting bugs, and I have to say, I'm so sorry, it's coming, we're coming with something that will hopefully fix this soon. So that has been really, really interesting to see how one rewrite will kind of fix a lot of things. And then the second thing I'll say is that there's also a lot of, forward thinking when we think about how we triage issues. And so what I didn't really realize about this team was that, yes, we're writing this Python extension, but we're also kind of thinking about where Python is going in the future. So where is it? What's becoming more popular? What's going to be more interesting? So one of those things is WebAssembly. so WASI support with Python. And so this is something that's still very new, but from like last year, Brett has been interested in it. My intern project last year was on it. And like Brett is like, this is going to be important. Our team is like, this is going to be important. How are we going to make sure we're supporting that growth as people go forward? Because if we're making the tools that people are going to use to build these new and cool projects with Python, we need to make sure our tools supports the new and cool things with Python. So I love how forward thinking we are there, that we're always trying to make sure we know what's coming next for the community.
That's exciting. And actually, I forgot to mention the WASI support in the previous question, but I also saw Luciana nodding her head while everyone was giving their comments. So I want to put you on the spot a little bit first, Luciana, because you're one of the main PMs for this interaction. Can you tell me a little bit more about like how this workflow affects you and the forward looking? And I know you're all in the know with multiple teams on Python support and VS Code.
Well, I'm very flattered, and I'd like to share all this with my co-PM Courtney, because now she is a huge part of this whole prioritization work and a lot of the conversations that we have. And it's interesting because I get this question a lot around like, oh, the PM for the team, like how do you prioritize items? We worked a little bit differently with the team. It's not like the I've heard that a lot of teams PMs come and say, this is what we're working on next, and that's it. That's not how we do things. We work together as a team. So each one comes and says like, oh, this is a topic that is changing a lot in the area that I am, my area of expertise. Maybe something that we should consider. And we bring to this, we have like monthly planning meetings, and we start talking about these things and how we're going to solve it and what we're going to do. Like Eleanor mentioned, we do a lot of forward thinking. So a lot of times there are problems that we know we can't solve immediately, but we have kind of like in our roadmap how this is going to be addressed. And then we just have that conversation with, is this the time that we're ready to work on? A lot of times we want to add new features or new functionalities that depends on VS Code itself. So we need to coordinate with them with new APIs. There are some things that are actually better handled by the Pylance team or the Jupyter extension team. So we just coordinate with them. One thing I'll say is that we do prioritize a lot in terms of outreach. Is that the right word? Basically, if there is an issue that a lot of folks are interested in and upvoting, these are things that are more on our faces. So it does influence our prioritization, because the more users needed, the more likely we are going to be working towards addressing those. So if you have something that you really want to see happening, do go to our issue, to our repository, and look for the issues. See if there is anything there that you'd really like to see, and then upvote it, because then there are higher chances that we'll end up prioritizing it at some point.
Awesome. And let me put that on screen as well. That's the repo. Cool. And here's a good question that we could have said at the very beginning. Anyone want to answer? Where do we all work?
Microsoft.
Microsoft. Yes, we all work at Microsoft, and it supports VS Code. Great. Oh, such great answers. And so now I'm going to circle back like I promised you. Brett, can you tell us a little bit more about like the WASI exploration that you've been doing? I know Eleanor did a really great job introing it. Do you want to talk a little bit more too?
Sure. So a couple of years ago, I kind of saw WebAssembly coming down the pipe and going, oh, that's interesting. So I started to poke and prod like I do around some of these big items that I think might impact Python, just because my position on the Python Steering Council and the Python core development team, just trying to make sure Python kind of stays up with the trends or even ahead of the trends, knowing where things are going to go, so that Python continues to be a useful, relevant tool for the world to use. And so I took an interest in WebAssembly and just basically started to look around on it, see where things going. At one point, Mozilla, via their PyODad project, which has now been spun out into its own open source project, kind of got things up and going in the browser. As Eleanor mentioned, she did a whole internship kind of looking at the state of the world last summer. Well, actually, 2 summers ago now, because she joined this summer. So that would have been summer 2021. And around that time, I got a little personal interest in this because my wife actually got a bit frustrated with Python not running in the browser and basically told me go fix it. So I subsequently got marching orders to go fix it. And so over the past year, we've been kind of getting that to a position where it's usable. And we're very lucky that Dirk on our team was given the task to see what it would take to kind of make WebAssembly work in VS Code. And he used something called WASI. If you're not familiar with some of these terms, WebAssembly is kind of like it's kind of like a virtual CPU that runs safely on anywhere. WASI, which stands for WebAssembly Systems Interface, is basically kind of a standard that says like, hey, pretend there's always this function here, and this is how you read a file, right? That kind of low-level stuff. People like to compare it to POSIX. If you happen to know what that is, it's okay if you don't. But it's just a standard to be able to say, like, if you write some WebAssembly code, make sure it kind of just tries to access files using these functions, and it gets like environment variables this way. And it's just basically a standard that you can build for. And what Dirk's been able to do is actually make VS Code be what's called a WASI runtime, which basically means if you code for WASI, you have to have a runtime to provide those functions to read files, get environment variables, anything that has to touch the operating system where you might want some security. And Dirk's basically made VS Code a runtime for WASI. So it's been really nice where this work that's happened upstream that we've been doing in Python itself to get it to work in WebAssembly and in WASI is now kind of spilled into VS Code. And now we have this experimental browser extension for vscode.dev for the browser that actually lets you load up Python using WASI in VS Code on vscode.dev and have it actually be able to run your code. It gives you a REPL. You can actually debug with it, right? So we're just constantly kind of working towards improving that story as best we can, both upstream in Python itself, so that it benefits the whole community, and also how can we tie that into the extension itself to try to just improve that situation as well. Because and personally, obviously, I have bias. I've been told I have to make this work, but also I think there's an opportunity here for Python to be one of the key dynamic programming languages in WebAssembly and try to help keep that ball moving forward so that Python basically isn't left behind as WebAssembly becomes more and more of a thing, which from my viewpoint really happened last year. I think 2022 was kind of a turning point. Like Ruby also announced their support as well. There's a lot of work in the WebAssembly group on the W3C trying to improve things as well. And I think we're luckily just hit that crest so that we're staying right ahead of it. But we're going to continue to work with it, continue to try to improve it and try to stay in front of it.
Yeah. I've heard a lot about it in 2022. It's been very buzzy. That's been very, very cool. Awesome.
Mhm.
And you did an excellent breakdown. I knew a lot of those things, but it was just kind of pieced together very, very well, Brett. Thank you. And Brett knows like I'll be pinging him about like WASI things every once in a while too.
Anytime.
Cool. Let's get back to some Django, Flask, and Fast API support. So if the audience or people who are not typically on this call want to contribute suggestions for some of these language or framework supports, what do they do?
I can take that one. And basically, I guess I'm going to say what I just said. If you go to our GitHub issues and then find existing suggestions that are there they would like to see, I think Django in the test is one of the most upvoted ones.
Okay.
That's a one way. But there's also just filing new issues or new feature requests. We have, like Kartik was saying, around the life cycle of our issues. We do have a process that whenever you submit a suggestion, we wait around, I think, 60 days. Until folks upvote it, and if it reaches our threshold of upvotes, then we don't close the issue, we leave it there because enough folks in the community showed interest. So we do have a few open issues existing for Django, Flask, Fast API as well. But if you have any other ideas, please do file a feature request.
Awesome. And that spiel was a little bit different and more targeted to the question. You're not repeating yourself. It was a great answer. Awesome. And I want to be thank you for everyone who's been attending the stream. We've been talking about Python from the top to the bottom, but don't want to forget about people who may be new to Python, just setting up Python on a new machine, switching code editors, or if people who are Pythonistas on this call really want to give directions to people who may be new to Python. how do they jump in and how can VS Code help?
And now
Yeah,
I'm looking at Courtney.
I was gonna say I can take this one. We really like to make the extension open for people that are coming from all different experiences. And so whether you're new to Python or just new to VS Code, we want to make sure that you have a good experience. And so the place that I would start is the Python getting started experience. It's built into VS Code, but also on the website and our docs. And so that will take you from installing VS Code all the way through running your first line of Python in VS Code and can make you successful. In terms of VS Code more generally, looking at building out your extension portfolio, I would look at the little Microsoft verified extensions. That'll indicate that those are popular extensions, they're well maintained, in good health, and set you up there. And then there's also just a lot of good workflows that we document and try to promote in the extension too. So just making sure that you take the time to set up your keyboard shortcuts how you like them to, and find the best workflow for you to make you feel most comfortable. And then always don't be shy to give us feedback and ask us questions on all of our different channels so we can help you be successful and make the tool best for everyone.
That's great. And we're coming near the end of the call. Who would have thought I'd planned it, timed it perfectly? This is going to be one of our last questions, and then we're going to wrap up after that. But how can we keep track of upcoming features for Python in VS Code?
You gonna do it or am I gonna do it?
I'm actually still looking at Courtney since we're already talking.
I can take it again, and then
Go
we can add to it. One of the big places is our release notes, so you can track the work that we're doing, the work that's upcoming in our published release notes every month. We also have our public plans that we put out, so you can track what we're working on in current time. And then I'm trying to think of other good places. Keep up with our issues in our repo. The ones that we're actively commenting on and engaging in is another good way to stay involved and stay up to date.
Awesome. Cool. And I do want to highlight that we do have in real time you're updating the priorities in the repo. That's really big. You really don't see that for a lot of tools. So just kind of kudos to my favorite team. Cool.
I mean, I kind of mentioned this earlier, but we really do run ourselves as an open source project, right? As Courtney said, our monthly iteration plan is a public issue on our repo that gets published and updated weekly. So there's not a whole lot happening behind the scenes that we don't have, unless there's some security reason or something that we have to keep it behind closed doors. We pretty much try to do everything through issues and open. Our stand up, the triaging, we always say, leave a comment, right? Just because we forget to. We don't want to, there's no magic note thing behind the scenes where we keep track of stuff. We try to put everything out there as much as we can because once again, we're just trying to run as any other open source project. We just happen to be lucky enough to get paid to work on it.
Awesome. All right. It looks like we're just about time. This has really been a blast. I mean, I promised you all we'd have fun, and I think we had fun. I had to goad them on to get on the camera. No, they all came on willingly. I'm so excited we were able to share this time with you all online. Thank you for joining the episode of the Python Pulse, a Microsoft podcast. I want to give a big shout out to our producer, Peggy, who is pivotal in getting the stream aired every month. And if you just happen to stumble upon this stream, you can find us on Twitch or YouTube. And if you liked us, you can leave a comment or subscribe to the VS Code channel. There are a ton of awesome additional videos and streams that come out under this banner. So you'll get to see a lot of really cool and tech famous faces that show up on this channel. So really, really glad that you all were able to join, and please like and subscribe. You can find Python for VS Code on Twitter at Python VS Code. And if you want to chat with us Pythonistas at Microsoft, you can join our Discord. We put the Discord link in the chat. Let me put it back up. Here we go. You can join us on Discord. and to talk all things snake related. And we'll be back on February 24th at 11 a.m. Pacific time, 7 p.m. UTC, with a bonus episode February 24th. And we'll be talking about data science in VS Code. And you can find me here every second Friday of the month. My name is Dawn Wages, and you have just watched the Python Pulse. Wow. So, yay, it was great. Bye, all.